What's going on, everybody? You've got Austin, you got Chris, you got Nick, you've got a series win for Ole Miss, and we're here to tell you all about it. It's time for the Maryland recap right here on the Rebel Walk. I just love having intro for us now. It's fantastic. Okay, guys. Well, let's jump right in. We saw, I'm pretty sure, everything you could see in baseball this weekend for the newfangled baseball. Everything from the pitch clock to a million home runs hit in one weekend at Swayze Field. Overall, it was a rough night Friday, but losing Hunter Elliott is certainly something that we'll talk about, but also is going to put you in a little bit of a bind. But Ole Miss did a great job of bouncing back yesterday and today, fighting through all the walks yesterday. We're going to kind of go through it a little bit at a time here. We'll start with Friday. Obviously, the big news of the weekend was Hunter Elliott going down. We still don't know, unless you guys have heard. I have not officially heard what has happened with him yet. It hasn't been announced. As far as I know, Mike has not spoken about the findings of the MRIs. Maybe we'll hear something more about that this weekend. I'm not sure. Losing Hunter, so Jack Doherty had to come in and start. And Jack wasn't terrible. It just was kind of one of those games where if it could go wrong, it started to go wrong, kind of started to snowball. Maryland's offense just really started to pile it on. And boy, do they have a good offense. Can't say anything about that. But first of all, guys, let's start with your thoughts from Friday night. Obviously, the one loss from the weekend. And
I thought it was, it's baseball. All right, I started early. You can't win them all, but it was good to see that we kind of flushed it. Came out Saturday, swung the bats well, which we didn't do Friday night. But all in all, I think it was a good weekend. Learned some stuff about the team. Got some teachable moments. But yeah, I thought it was a good weekend overall.
Yeah, Friday night, I think the Maryland pitcher, Sevacool, I think he was absolutely lights out. And I think this matches up for me really well when you think about what we're going to get involved in here in a couple of weeks as far as an SEC type series. It was back and forth. It was, punch after punch after punch where we traded punches with Maryland throughout the weekend. It was lead changes on Saturday. It was, like you said, Austin, things you've never seen before. I've never seen a catcher unassisted double play. Saw that yesterday. The amount of home runs that were hit today at Swayze were just incredible. So all in all, I thought it was a really good weekend for us. Obviously, great to get the series against a top quality opponent.
Yeah, you mentioned the home runs today. There were, 3, 5, 6, 7. There were 8 home runs today hit in one game. 2 by Calvin Harris for Ole Miss, and of course 2 by LaRusso, I believe is how he pronounces his name, for Maryland. And things got a little chippy today as well with the TJ McCants. What a return for him. That was an absolute pimp shot from TJ McCants. And he was admiring it, and I don't blame him. Catcher for Maryland didn't like it. Things got a little chippy, but it doesn't matter when Ole Miss wins the game. But it was just a lot of fun. Yesterday, the story of the game was walks. Walks. Ole Miss walked. If I'm not mistaken, it was 12 by the time the game over. I could be off by a number. I'll verify that. And also hit 4. So whenever you do that, usually it's not going to work in your favor, but the offense for Ole Miss found a way to bounce back from that and pull out the win. Real resiliency shown yesterday, especially after Sonye left the game.
Yeah, I think that Sonye was not his typical self. I think he would admit that if you ask him. I know Mike talked about that in post game, that we really didn't see the type of start that he saw in the fall out of Grayson, and that he expects to see out of him further on throughout the year from Grayson. So I think it was just an atypical start. You're always going to have that throughout the season where a guy goes out there and it's just not his day. And it's time for the rest of the team to pick them up. And our offense did yesterday. So kudos to them, as well as the bullpen, did what they needed to do to get the job done, holding the Maryland hitters at bay yesterday. So all in all, I thought yesterday was a good win, right? I mean, anytime you win against a top 15 team, it's going to be a good win. Like Nick says, we can't win them all. There were other clubs across the country that have dropped their first games over the weekend. And so you're going to see that over the course of a season.
Yeah, I think like Chris said, it's nice to see when you have an offense whenever you don't get that quality start from a pitcher that can come in and put 12 or 18 today. But that's not always going to happen where you have the offense come in and score 10 plus. So it's definitely something that you got to improve. But it's not, it didn't end up killing us this weekend. So it was nice to be able to see that offense be able to pick up the pitcher slack.
It was 11 walks yesterday for Maryland, not 12. Lost in that, Ole Miss was walked 8 times. So there were 19 walks in that game yesterday. That's just an insane number of walks for a single baseball game. But Ole Miss pulled out the win 12-6. Mason Nichols, great job shutting the door late in that one. Really like seeing him back out there. And the bullpen is certainly going to have to be ready this season. I think that's becoming obvious. Obviously, with the new pitchers of Saunier and Rivas especially, and not sure what's going to happen with Hunter Elliott, we could be seeing a lot of the bullpen for Ole Miss a lot this year. And we saw it a lot today. Obviously, Rivas struggled once he got out of the first inning. Things started to kind of spiral through a lot of pitches. Did a great job of getting out of a couple situations. But at some point, he starts to leave those breaking balls hanging. You can tell he's starting to get a little tired. And that's kind of when things started to go downhill for him. But then Ole Miss comes in. Morrell gets out of a huge jam to keep the door shut on Maryland there for a little while. And just when you think Ole Miss is running away with it, here comes Maryland right back into it. And then Ole Miss will get a couple runs, and then Maryland comes right back into it. It was very much a roller coaster game today, but just a brilliant job yet again by our bullpen. And in particular, let's talk about Braden Jones. The kid is just – I sent out a tweet earlier about Braden Stones Jones because the guy just comes out and gets into a bad spot, bases loaded. Mike comes out to chat with him, and you think, oh, boy, this is where it could go. This is a freshman pitcher. We've only seen him, I believe that was yesterday was his first, or Friday maybe, was his first appearance of the year so far. And this is a guy who you just don't know how he's going to react in these situations. Gives up a long fly ball to center, and you're starting to get real nervous when that ball's in the air, and there's the catch made. And that right there, you talk about a confidence boost for a young pitcher. That's going to do it right there.
Yeah, I think that the bullpen, like you said, Austin, is just going to be – it's going to be called on nearly every game if we don't get and obviously we're, putting the cart out there a little bit before the horse. Right. We don't know what's going to happen with Hunter yet. And, I have no indication about one way or another. I do have thoughts, but at this point in time, out of respect for the young man, I'm going to reserve those thoughts and keep them in private until we know something a little bit more definite. I think the bullpen is going to be really important. And as we saw last year, when we really didn't know much about Hunter, we didn't know who was going to fill that third starter role for us. And so people stepped up throughout the season. And I think that's what's going to happen this year is we're going to roll through some evolutions with pitchers and, where they fit, whether they fit in the middle of the game, whether they fit in the end of the game, how they fit. It might be a situation where we say, Rivas is more – I'm not suggesting this at all, but just a thought. Maybe Rivas is more of a bullpen guy to get us some long innings in some games, and we throw somebody else in there to start. So I don't think that after this weekend, obviously, I don't think that the pitching, if Hunter gets put on the shelf, I don't think that the pitching rotation is set, nor do I think the bullpen rotation is set. I think you've got a lot of guys that can throw in a lot of different roles, and it will continue to evolve throughout the season.
Yeah, like Chris is saying, just to clear, we are not diagnosing Hunter Elliott. We do not know. So nobody take this show and say, oh, the Rebel Walk guys said Hunter Elliott was done for the year. No, but none of us said that. We don't know. So Chris did a great job of explaining that and properly so. We're going to hold any thoughts we may have till the diagnosis comes out because we may have thoughts, but we're not medical experts and we don't know. And we haven't talked directly with them. I know I haven't. And Hunter was having fun this weekend. I can tell you that much. He was out in the dugout. He was having a great time. So it's good to see him out there. And hopefully we'll get some good news on him soon. Just waiting on that from the team for the official statement. So with the way the pitching staff is, yes, as you said, Chris, I agree with you that I don't think the pitching rotation is going to be fully set. And regardless of whether Hunter comes back, we still don't know if it's fully set. We still haven't seen really Saunier and Rivas a ton yet. So they both looked good against Delaware. Obviously, Maryland, a much more powerful offensive team. So you get a little bit more banged up in those games. But early in the season, that's when you want to have that happen. And guess what? You're going to see the same Maryland team in a week when you go to Minnesota to play in the Cambria Classic, and you're going to see them again on Friday. So this isn't over yet. I'm curious. We'll talk about that. Obviously, it's another time, but I am curious how that game's going to go after how chippy this weekend got. But we're getting ahead of ourselves there. So this game, we're gonna get to a particular segment that I'm excited about Player of the Weekend. So I don't want to get into that too early. But outside of Player of the Weekend, what were you guys excited about most from this weekend that you saw? Outside of that, we'll get to that here in a few minutes. And Nick, we'll start with you on this one because I know you have a Player of the Weekend, but we're not going to talk about that just yet.
All right. Yeah. So today I was looking, all the starters reached base, and I think it's been something that we've seen year after year, 1 through 9 in Mike Bianco's offense. Everybody knows their role, does a job. And today, I really, they're, whenever the bases are loaded like that late in the game and you have a chance to kind of put the nail in the coffin, guys were taking their walks, having good at bats and not getting too selfish. But, I think and there's guys like Anthony Calarco, we hadn't seen him much, and he didn't play Tuesday, and I'm not sure if he started. I don't think he started all 3 games last weekend, but, he kind of, showed us what he can do in the middle of that lineup, be a bat that can grind out in that bat and go deep when you need, that couple of runs. So, I was real excited to see the offense, be able to pick up the pitchers this weekend after, a couple not so great starts from Saunier and really all 3 of them. But it's early in the season and you're going to grow to see, what those guys are really made of.
Chris, what about you?
Yeah, I think the word that I'm going to use it was ask of Mike yesterday, and I just thought I can't remember who asked it in post game, but the word was resiliency, and I think that yesterday the team showed a lot of resiliency, and Maryland kept punching at them and would continue to get leads on them, and that game wasn't really settled until the late innings of yesterday, and so I think that not getting too down on themselves, especially after they kind of got hit in the mouth on Friday night, and then coming back on Saturday and having to work through playing from behind a little bit, it really shows me that this team is that mature team that they said they were coming into the season, and that it's not, it's a rebuild year. This is just a reload year for Ole Miss, and I think they're proving that right now.
Yeah, I think for me, and we talked about it a little bit already, but obviously you could talk about the offense all day, and rightfully so. But I really like what I saw out of the young bullpen arms. I think that they're going to get a lot of confidence from these kind of outings, a lot of early season trouble, and learning how to take pressure. That is the benefit of scheduling teams like Maryland in the early season when you have an opportunity to face a team that can hit home runs like they do. I mean, they had 4 grand slams in 4 games, for crying out loud. I mean, this team was ridiculous. They hit 1 or 2 this weekend. It may have just been the 1 grand slam they hit, but just a crap ton of home runs. I mean, the team is offense like coming out of their ears, and for the young arms to get that experience, I think was huge. So that kind of really stood out to me as a whole. So I'm excited to see what they can take from that, coming up with a good series coming up in the midweek with a good Louisiana Tech team as well. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. But first, I'm excited to introduce a new segment to the show. And I'm excited about this. Is kind of going to be Nick's thing, and we're working on this. We're going to get Chris a segment too. We got to get, but we're going to all be a part of all these. So you guys kind of bear with us as we figure these out. We're trying to I've been working with Evie a lot. So Evie's kind of is the main boss on this. So you guys work with us on this. We're trying to come up with segments for the show, make the show even better for you. So we're excited about this. So stay tuned for even more of that coming up as we add more to the show to make it even more professional and more exciting. Really excited about that. So the segment we're going to do first is what we were just talking about. It's time for the Player of the Weekend. I mean, Bo is the greatest. Is Bo not great? Just making this stuff for us. So, Nick, take it away. We're going to let you start. I'm sure we may all 3 agree on who we think the Player of the Weekend is, but maybe not. Nick, who you got for us?
Yeah, so I think I texted y'all, there in that last inning, I was kind of torn on who I was going to pick. But once the game was over, I was sure who I was going to pick. So Calvin Harris, great weekend at the plate. 2 for 4 Friday night. 1 for 4 yesterday, and then today he goes 4 for 5 with a double and 2 home runs and 8 RBIs. Just a guy in the middle of the lineup that and we saw him hit last year. He was inserted into the lineup late in the year in Coral Gables, and he's just a pure hitter. And on top of that, played a great defense this weekend. Chris was talking about it earlier in this show. The unassisted double play yesterday, was just that's who he is. He's the guy that can, ball gets by him, and he's quite athletic. A lot of time it's a misconception, that sometimes just catchers get stuck behind the plate, because they can't play a outfield or infield. But we've seen him all over the diamond since he's been at Ole Miss. So he's quite the athlete. And yeah, just right there today, batted third. But the past 2 games in the 4-hole, just gave us what we needed this weekend. That shot in the arm, and really got us out of because I was thinking, we were going to have to end up finding some pitchers, for the last 2.5 innings of the game. So, just Calvin Harris is my player of the weekend.
Chris,
hard for me
with that?
Yeah, hard for me to disagree with that. Calvin Harris it's in this era of NIL and portal transfer portal, and everything else like that. It's hard to imagine that, a guy is going to sit behind somebody for 2 years before he gets the opportunity to play his natural position. And catcher is Calvin's natural position. And the guys that on the TV broadcast today were talking about how he's probably going to go really high in the draft or one of the highest rated catchers. And I think today he made himself a lot of money with those 2 home runs he had, and as well as his defensive prowess. We, as good as Hayden Dunhurst is, an excellent catcher, obviously, but we really haven't seen a lot of drop off in the position of catcher from Calvin, which is just really impressive when it comes down to, you look at a really, really solid backstop like Hayden Dunhurst, and you're just, you're replacing him with a really, really talented catcher in Calvin Harris. So I can't disagree with Nick on this. I think Calvin is going to continue to do some really, really great things. Obviously, Kemp had a good weekend as well. A nice home run out of Kemp today. But if I was picking this on my own, it'd be Calvin Harris. Absolutely.
Yeah.
What about you, Austin?
None of us discussed this. Yes, Nick sent us a text, but we didn't discuss this amongst ourselves. It's hard to pick somebody different. I'm with you both. I mean, you could make an argument that Gonzo had a great weekend, and he did. But if you look at the whole, I mean, you look at defensively, offensively. Now, Gonzo showing the flash of the leather. Well, great play in this game in particular, where he was backing up Leger over at third to get that out at first on a really bang play. But overall, Calvin Harris, just the bat, as Chris said, no significant drop off whatsoever. And you look at the pitchers that he's having to deal with. A lot of them knew the control isn't always there. He's in the dirt. He's over here. He's over there. He's lined up down here. The ball goes that way, and he's stopping them. You just really like what you're seeing from Calvin. And then, of course, just the country strong pop that boy's got. I mean, that walk-off grand slam that he hit, it did not look like he got all of it. If you just look at the swing and how the ball came off the bat, you wouldn't think that's a home run. But that's just his absolute strength. Kemp Alderman is the same way. They just have brute strength. And sometimes it's nice to have that in the lineup. Absolutely. So Calvin Harris all around, I don't think anybody would disagree with that. Feel free to let us know in the comments for sure if any of you have other people you would consider for player of the weekend. But I think Calvin Harris is going to be the unanimous decision for all of us here at the Rebel Walk. Now, before we get into our final segment of the day, which will be going around the SEC a little bit, what we will do is, first of all, one thing we forgot to mention, I hate to back up, but we didn't really talk about the pitch clock a lot. That and I'm curious what you guys think about it after watching it for the weekend. Yesterday, we saw a Major League Baseball game end on a pitch called a strike because the batter wasn't in the box on time. And now today, we saw very early in the game, Maryland had a batter called out looking on strike 3 because he was not facing the pitcher or in the batter's box properly at the right time. I feel like it's going to have to be tweaked a little bit. I feel like that's going to cause problems if it stays the way it is just after watching this first weekend, but it is early in the season, or second weekend, not first weekend. Early in the season, obviously things are going to change. Your guys' thoughts, Chris, I'd love to start with you. Pitch clock and how you think that's affected baseball so far and what you'd like to see change maybe about it.
Yeah, I think that it's good for the game. I think that one of the guys last weekend that was really vocal about his displeasure with the pitch clock was Schwarzenegger at Texas A&M. And if you remember back last year, it seemed like Texas A&M games would go on and on and on and on forever. And so to me, it was like, oh, you're the guy that's complaining because this is, you're the reason the rule was made. So it's really tough. I do think that there needs to be some tweaking done. I don't know exactly how the umpires were told to officiate that, but I do think there needs to be some discretion. I would hate to see a college game in with the bases loaded and we're going to strike a guy out because he wasn't within the batter's box within 1 or 2 seconds of fulfilling the absolute rule. So I do think there needs to be some discretion that's done for this. So I don't think it needs to be a complete black and white thing. There's no audible sound in the stadium for umpires to go off of. I don't know how it's viewed by the pitcher. I don't know whether the pitcher can see this clock. I don't know how the batter is able to view the clock. I know within 12, I guess it's within 12 seconds is what they said on the broadcast today, that you have to be facing the batter or facing the pitcher or something like that. There's a lot of information that needs to be done within those 12 seconds. I think teams will adjust to it. So I think there's an adjustment period, and I think we're seeing that right now. But I do think there needs to be some discretion that's involved on the part of the umpires that are officiating the shot clock or the pitch clock, whatever. And in all honesty, I do come from an umpire perspective on this. So I understand that they've got to do a lot of different things. But I do think that we need to officiate the game in the best interest of the student athlete, and because that's what it's all about, or that's what it should be all about.
Nick, what about you?
Yeah, I agree with Chris. And actually at Swayze, so the clock is in right center field on the outfield wall. So the pitcher has to go out of his way to look for it. And I saw some footage from MLB games, and they have clocks behind home plate. And not sure, but probably there's one also in outfield. So, I think like Chris said, there has to be some kind of almost like a grace period where if the batter's not in the box at a certain time, okay, let's give them a second here, a second there. But there's a lot that is, I feel like for us as spectators, that's unknown. When does the batter have to be in the box? When does the pitcher have to be on the mound? And and like y'all said, I would hate for there to be a big game, big moment, batters get in the box with full count, and umpire comes behind the plate waving his arms and calls the guy out.
Right.
And just I think it's good for the game, but at the same time, it's causing people to change how they play the game. So there's some a little bit of gray area, and it'll get figured out. Like y'all said, it's early in the season. I think teams will start to adjust, but and just for us as spectators, it's just something different that we're also going to have to get used to.
Yeah, and you would think with what both of you brought to attention about where the clock is and who can see it, you would think that at some point, if college baseball is going to make this a fully implemented serious thing, they're going to have to put a clock behind the home plate as well, because making the pitcher have to turn and look to the outfield wall to see how much time he's got left is a little bit difficult. Otherwise, coaches hollering at him or something. I'm really not sure how that's being communicated to them at this point. And the batter can look out there and see it, but even so, that's a long ways away. Depending on where the infielders are, he may have to strain to see it, look around somebody. So certainly something that's going to be tweaked. I do agree with Chris. I like the speed of the game because of it. I don't think there's anything wrong with baseball being a little faster. Now, I am a little bit of a baseball purist in the sense of I don't like it being messed with too much, but I do think there are certain things you can do to improve the game, and speeding them up is certainly one, because with the younger and younger generations watching baseball, the attention spans just aren't as long. And that's not a knock on anyone, I promise. But they don't want to sit and watch a baseball game for 4 hours, 5 hours. Texas A&M was brutal, even for me last year. I think the game I went to for A&M, I got there, it was a 6:00 first pitch, and I didn't leave Swayze until after 11. And that's just insane to me, for one game. So I do like those changes, but certainly going to be some tweaks made. And in particular to what Chris said, you've got to have some umpire discretion there. And I think that will be more training. You feel like that's going to come from the NCAA or whoever that is that's going to allow that to happen. Because if you just start saying by the book, oh, it's 8 seconds, this guy's out, that's going to cause issues. You just feel like it's going to cause problems down the road. So extenuating circumstances and things of that nature. All right. So now it is time for one final segment, another new one that we're excited to bring to you. It's time to go around the SEC. All right, so basically what we're going to do in this segment is we're going to just go through the SEC, kind of where we stand right now, particularly with Ole Miss, standing scores, et cetera, from the weekend around the SEC. As it stands right now, there are 2 undefeated teams remaining in SEC baseball, and that is South Carolina and Alabama, the 2 that everybody thought would be undefeated at the end of the first 2 weeks. South Carolina and Alabama baseball have not lost to this point. Over in the SEC East, it is Florida at 7-1, Tennessee 6-2. There's a 3-way tie at 5-2 with Georgia, Kentucky, and Missouri. And then Vanderbilt, of all teams, sitting in last place in the SEC East right now at 5-3. They did get a good win today, but they've had some struggles early in the season. And, of course, in the SEC West, we've got Alabama at 8-0, and then Ole Miss sitting pretty at 6-1 right behind them, followed by LSU, who is in progress right now. They are going to improve to 6-1 if that score upholds, but they're 5-1. Auburn at 5-1-1 after their game ended with a tie today in the 12th inning. Another interesting tweak to baseball, as another inning would not have started, and therefore the game ended in a tie. So Auburn has that extra digit. Arkansas at 5-2, Mississippi State at 5-3, and Texas A&M at 4-3. It was an interesting weekend in the SEC. Some upsets all around. I don't know if you would consider Arizona State over Mississippi State an upset on Friday night. I would give it to the upset just because it's at Dudy Noble, and that's a tough place to win, especially for a long ways out of town team. You had Texas A&M nearly get swept by Portland. You had Wright State getting a win over Kentucky. I mean, there are a lot of kind of quote-unquote no-name teams that a lot of people in the SEC probably haven't heard of a lot getting wins this weekend. Of course, Maryland, Ole Miss was the victim of one of those losses on Friday night as well, with Maryland coming in and winning over Ole Miss, but Ole Miss wins the series. So brutal weekend for some in the SEC, but overall it's lights out for Ole Miss, and Alabama a surprise to me. I don't know what you guys think about that. I knew they were going to be better this year, and of course they did sweep Ole Miss last year, but I didn't necessarily see them being 8-0. Now, you've got to kind of take into account that they haven't necessarily played anybody of note, so to speak. But nonetheless, 8-0 is hard to get when you're playing a lot of baseball in a short period of time.
Yeah, I think Alabama is a lot better this year, and I think that D1 Baseball had them either ranked in the top 25 or just outside the top 25 to start. So I don't honestly hadn't looked at their schedule, so I don't know who they played. That LSU drop yesterday was kind of surprising to me against Iowa. The Auburn thing was really interesting. I was following it just a little bit. Apparently, SC had a run taken off the board by Auburn was supposed to travel out to SC, but they had the bad weather thing on the West Coast, and so SC came to Auburn. And Auburn had I don't know if they continue to let USC be home or not. I don't know how they worked that out. But SC had a run taken off the board because Auburn appealed the runner not touching home, and the ump said that he didn't touch home. So that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, it was. And I believe there was another play in that same game with a first base, if I'm not mistaken, that was very similar. So that one was kind of a crazy. I didn't get to watch it because, of course, I was watching Ole Miss. So I was kind of following that on Twitter with the D1 guys. But very crazy game in Auburn. Auburn does take I don't know if you call it taking the series or not, because I believe they split it. So only one game left in progress right now. That is LSU, who is getting some revenge for that loss yesterday. They were up 10-0 early on Sam Houston. So that's not looking good for the old fighting Sam Houston. Sam Houston down in your neck of the woods, I believe, right, Chris? Somewhere at least not too far from you guys?
Yeah, closer to Houston, obviously, but Huntsville, Texas. They were 2-0 going in today. So if they would have beaten LSU, they would have won the series. Speaking of Houston, it was a good segue. Thank you, Austin, for teeing that up for me. If you have not seen Drew Bianco's catch today, please go check that out, because that was some huge highway robbery in center field for Coach Bianco's son.
Drew Bianco is showing off a little bit here in the last couple of games. He's made a couple of real nice catches out there, so making Houston proud. And Jack, and I'm going to butcher this last name, Caglianone, potentially for Florida. I may have gotten that wrong. Hit 3 home runs today, and the exit velocity on them was 118, 115, 110 for Florida in their win. That is pretty impressive for Florida there. So that guy's got some pop on the bat for Florida. So a couple of Drew Bianco, and that was, I mean, making Coach Mike proud. You just love to see it. I love how supportive that whole family is of each other as well. It's really awesome to see. Ole Miss up next. We'll have Louisiana Tech for a 2-game series on Tuesday and Wednesday. Both of those games will be at 4 p.m. Louisiana Tech right now sitting at 4-3 overall. They took 2 out of 4 from BYU and 2 out of 3 from Nicholls State so far this season. So hard to get a real idea of what they're going to be, but that team has really improved over the last couple of years. And they have a really nice facility as well at Louisiana Tech. So I'm excited to play that team, kind of a regional game as well, to kind of get another Louisiana team in here to play. So excited about that for the 2-game weeknight series, I should say, before Ole Miss heads to Minnesota to take on the Cambria College Classic, I believe is what it's called. They will play Maryland, Minnesota, and Nebraska in that 3-game span. As far as I know, those games are scheduled. They will not depend on wins or losses, if I'm not mistaken, but I could be wrong on that. I don't, but yeah, so they will play all 3 of those teams. So I'm excited to play teams we hardly ever get to see as well. So that's exciting. Maryland will come up first, another matchup with them. Chris and Nick, thanks so much. You guys are awesome. Glad to do these shows. Thank you guys for sticking with us. Thank you to Dead Soxy for jumping on board with us at Dead Soxy on Twitter. And, of course, deadsoxy.com. Use the code RebelWalk for 25% off your entire order every time, all the time, all year long. Doesn't matter what season. We are so excited about them. Be sure and check them out. And, of course, Lee at the Beach with Remax of Orange Beach. One of just our fantastic supporters of the Rebel Walk, fantastic supporter of Ole Miss, and also a great real estate agent for those of you in her area. Be sure to check her out, as she is awesome and she will get you hooked up. Her entire team has just over 50 years of experience in the business, and they're going to do a great job for you if you need a real estate agent. And these times where the housing market is so up and down and you never really know, it's good to have that experience on your side. So thanks to Lee at the Beach, and also thanks to Jason and Dead Soxy for being a part of these shows all the time. Great comfort, great quality. You just can't beat those socks, guys. I'm just telling you can't beat them. So check them out as well. We will be with you again we'll follow probably the Cambria Classic. I don't know if we'll follow the weeknight games or not. Obviously, schedules are a little bit harder to coordinate during the week, so we will keep you guys posted if we have a show after those 2 games. But we will try to have at least at the minimum shows for you after the weekend series whenever we can, schedules allowing for everyone involved. We really appreciate you guys watching all the time. It is always a pleasure. Thanks to Chris and Nick for joining me as always. And Ole Miss improves to 6-1 overall with a 2 out of 3 series win over number 13 Maryland. And that ought to see them go maybe up a little bit in the D1 baseball rankings. We'll find out tomorrow, probably around 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning. Depends on what happens ahead of them, of course. But LSU taking a loss, that'll certainly help. We'll see. Until next time, hotty toddy everybody, and have a great evening. We'll talk to you next time right here on the Rebel Walk.